tuned in to the Community Cats podcast. Ready? Let's go.
Welcome to the Community Cats podcast. I am your host, Stacy McVicker. I've been involved helping homeless cats for over 20 years with the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society. The goal of this podcast is to expose you to amazing people who are improving the lives of cats. I hope these interviews will help you learn how you can turn your passion for cats into action. And today we're speaking with Dr. Stacy McVicker. Stacy has a history of reading the wonderful James Herriot veterinary stories as a child, which showed Stacy early on that a good world must include loving care and kindness for all animals. Her master's thesis peaked at obstacles to spaying and neutering decisions, and eventually she followed a pathway to veterinary medicine. She is a self-proclaimed crazy cat lady and has cultivated feline medicine expertise as well as certification in veterinary physical rehabilitation and acupuncture. In the past, she served on the board of a local TNR organization in Denver, and currently she helps the many cats who cross her path, whether they are snuggled on her lap at home or at the hospital or visiting her front porch, the local plant nursery, or even the nearby senior center. So, Dr. McVicker, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Hi, Stacy. It's wonderful to share a name with you. I think, passion for cats.
I know. I think I'm going to refer to you as Dr. McVicker during the show. So then folks, when they're listening, they will know which Stacy is talking and the other one that's not talking. Fair. So I will be very official, even though I think we're quite casual here. So first and foremost, Dr. McVicker, what made you so passionate about cats?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. There's so many thoughts going through my mind. You mentioned James Herriot. So James Herriot is the wonderful author of All Creatures Great and Small and the many other books that bring to life taking care of animals all around us. And sometimes it's cows and pigs and cats and dogs. And my husband and I, last night, we're rewatching, as we do, the 1970s All Creatures Great and Small shows, which are wonderful as well. So when I was a kid, that was my passion. And animals, and I learned through that show the animals can be your family. They can give you purpose, warmth, and it just gave me direction. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. It gave me strength and direction. This is what I want to do and who I want to be in the world.
And so from that care and kindness, you have a veterinary journey that led you through a whole process. I mean, as you become a veterinarian, you go through school, you have to choose all these different directions and these different paths. And the topic we're going to be covering today is talking about pain. How did you get to this place through this journey?
Oh, that's a good question, to focus on pain. I love that. So vet school was a journey, and it was quite a few years ago. And I was blessed to discover that Colorado, which is where I live, was very receptive to non-traditional students. I thought I was old at the time at 32. And now I think, I was pretty young, actually. So we had amazing teachers at that university. And at that time, which is more than a couple of years ago, pain was discussed, but over time, if you hang out with the folks at the veterinary conferences, there's been, I would say in the last 10 years, just this burst of recognition that pain, we can all think about pain and think, I don't like it when I feel creaky or pain or back pain. I mean, what is worse than back pain or oral pain? But what we're finding in veterinary medicine, and it seems so simple, but it's so revolutionary too, is that pain with animals, they're different than we are. If something hurts on me, I'll lean over to, the wonderful woman I work with every day and go, oh man, it's hard to get up. But cats and other animals, they don't complain. They've learned over time that it doesn't benefit them to complain about their aches and pains, so they can be particularly cryptic about it. And so you have to be quite a Sherlock Holmes to know that an animal is painful. But there are exceptions, of course. So finding pain, I mean, that interests me. you have to look at it differently. And then there's also links between pain and so many issues that families have within a household that might create chaos. And so 2 doors down from our hospital, maybe it's 3 doors down, is a wonderful behavior veterinary group. And there's board certified veterinary behaviorists, there's smart, kind trainers. And one of the first things they will do when someone comes in with a dog or a cat for a behavior issue, let's say aggression within the household in some capacity, they will look at pain. Is there potential for pain underlying this reactivity? It's amazing. It's amazing how many things can underride pain. And it's also, when you're talking about cats, a lot of the pathology, so the systemic diseases that we trip over, like you think about cats and how many middle-aged and older cats have gastrointestinal problems, inflammatory disease, how many cats have inflammation in their urinary tract, their bladder. And there's some very smart people out there talking about how these diseases very well may be rooted in stress and pain. So it's become an awareness of pain is so interwoven into all these different quality of life concerns for animals. There's no way around it.
I think in the cat world, and I'll carry my biases from 50 years ago, growing up with cats, all we worried about is the cat eating, is the cat drinking, is it using the litter box? If you had a litter box, in olden times, there were times when people didn't use litter boxes. Cat just went outside, did its business. And now we're talking about feline enrichment. We're talking about understanding, pain in cat, trying to read the cases, what their situation is like. There are so many more components to cat care that now than what we did in the past. And, how do we worry about our cats. We worry so much about our cats because it's hard for them to communicate with us in the ways that we can receive the information. You said pet detective. So it sounds like there's a different language out there that I don't know about when I'm looking at my cat or cats to understand what's going on. You have a couple of case studies that you'd like to share with us, a few case studies today to help educate us on what we can do to better identify our cat's level of comfort or discomfort. Would you like to share one or two of them now?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're thinking about pain and is it present, there's a few different ways that we can try to find where pain exists. And so one of the areas of consideration is a little more obvious, and that would be traumatic pain. So that's something faced in a family household. That's something certainly faced among community cats. Traumatic pain can be experienced in the moment and easily appreciated by family members when you see it. So case in point, I will refer to my kitty Pip. So Pip, we lost Pip last year and she was 20. She had a good life. And she's a whole story. We could talk for way too long about Pippi. She's living the good life. And, we've got steers all around the house and everything is padded. And can you get to this? Can you get to that? But one night I hear, it was 3 a.m, and I hear boom, boom, boom. And I'm doing a terrible rendition, but she was coming down the hallway and she was dragging one of her hind limbs behind her. And cats, she's still trucking along. She's not vocalizing. At that time, she was 17. And I was like, oh, fill in the blank. What has happened here? What had happened here, fast forward to the next day. So she had a comminuted femoral fracture. And so what that means is the long bone that goes down your thigh was broken to a bunch of different pieces. So yucky, really yucky. And we fortunately were blessed. We went and saw the most wonderful orthopedic surgeon. And we talked about why this injury would have happened. And our house is good, but no house is perfect. And you have refrigerators and you have high places, and cats like them. And most cats, when they're young, they have strong bones, Superman bones. And so they leap off of tall things. And in many situations, they're just ballerinas and they get up and go. But when you have chronic kidney disease, it makes your bones soft. And so Pippi must have done a whoopsie doodle or tried to do a ballerina move, and her bone said, "Oh, I'm soft now," and it shattered. So that's an example of trauma. Now, she did well. She had surgery with the most amazing surgeon on the planet, and 4 weeks later, she was 90% healed in that femur, and she never looked back. But so trauma is one of the things we trip over. But also what's interesting about trauma is I remember a case in the hospital, a wonderful woman I worked with, Linda. She was our hospital manager, kind. Then one day she said to me, "Stacy, my cat," and I, for the life of me, can't remember how old her cat was, but she wasn't young. So "I think my cat's struggling with movement." I said, "Oh, okay." If my memory serves, I think I detected pain in her caudal spine, so back right above the tushy, right? And I said, "I think there might be pain here." We took pictures, and it was an old train wreck of an injury where her pelvis was completely misshapen. She had had some trauma in the distant past, and nobody knew for years and years and years and years. So trauma exists, and it's definitely something we should be aware of, and be aware of it potentially existing before they came to us and before we have a really obvious moment with them. So trauma is one of the things that can lead to pain. There's also just getting older, being young, being born a certain way. There are kittens who are born with really interesting congenital deformities. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but their ankle tarsal joint, they've got a hyperextension of the tarsus. There's a lot of things that we trip over in young cats. And what's interesting about degenerative joint disease, in the last 10 years, there have been quite a few studies where they've looked at cats, and these are not just old Pippi cats, but young cats, 6 years old, 8 years old, 4 years old, 10 years old, and they find osteoarthritic changes in 90% of those cats, and 50% of those cats hurt. And you think, wow, who would ever know that my 6-year-old might experience pain? So it can be very, very cryptic. So those are a few thoughts on the types of things that can cause pain. And I've got lots of other stories that we can think about, and other connections. So
yeah. You had talked about a kitty that was a community cat and your experience with that case. And I know many of our listeners are dealing with community cats. So I'd love for you to touch on that topic.
Yeah. So cats can get pain in a lot of different places. Honestly, any place. And your muscles can be painful, your tendons, your ligaments. The most common places we will see cats affected would be, if you think about your front legs, and the front legs of cats, elbows. Elbows are my arch enemy when it comes to degenerative joint disease. A lot of animals put a great deal of weight forward. And so when you have elbow changes, arthritic changes, boy, it can really hurt. The caudal spine is another area really common in cats that hurts. And I'm going to talk about the kitty you're referring to named Ferris, and he definitely has pain in his caudal spine. And then hips and knees and ankles. So the pelvic limbs, they seem to run the gamut in terms of having yucky poo-poo joints all along the pelvic limbs. So Ferris is adorable. This domestic, long hair, fuzzy, handsome dude that sauntered into one of the local plant nurseries they have amazing plants too. And he looked around and he said, "Okay, I'm staying here. And he's been there for more than a decade. And he's become a lovely old man. And they've reached out to me several times, and we've identified he has hyperthyroidism. So That's where you want to eat everything in sight and you get really skinny. So this team at the nursery, and it's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a lot of people caring for Ferris. They've got it figured out where he's getting his thyroid meds, but they reached out to me and said, Ferris is having a hard time getting up on things because he'll go up on the shelves. He'll curl up next to a plant. And they're really good about not having lilies near Ferris. And he's pretty smart. So he's learned stay away from those lilies, right? He's not doing it anymore. So I went over. When you're looking at cats for pain, the ways to know there's pain, I think it's a really great example because you could say, how do you know there's pain there? Well, number one, you can look across the horizon and find yourself a good cat vet, right? So you can say, this person knows how to cuddle a cat, be with a cat, make them comfortable. Now, when you go to a hospital, as much as I try to be not the evil demon who is the scary vet, because walking through the door, it's scary. So we have blankets, we have toys, we have treats, and some cats are like, hey, this is pretty cool. But there's always an element of hesitation with cats to let the guard down. They are trained in their brains to not tell you. And so if you have a veterinarian who's kind with cats, can handle them well, take their time, maybe what I'll do a lot of times is go to the window and we look at the birds in the parking lot. They don't always look when I tell them, hey, check out the swallow, and then they miss it. But sometimes they see birds that I don't see too. So we try to do our pelvic limb extension and things like that. Anyway, with Ferris, I didn't have him at the hospital, so I got to see him in his nursery home. And his caudal spine was just awful. And you could feel that muscles were atrophied. So spotting pain, have a good vet, but we also miss things. And I will say to my families, hey, I'm checking your kitty for pain. I'm feeling for crunchy joints. I'm feeling for remodeling where the joint's really fat. I'm feeling for squishy joints where there's fluid in the joint. I might sometimes falsely implicate a joint because they're nervous. So case in point is I'm doing what I call a ballerina move with the pelvic limb. And we go into extension or abduction. Abduction is peeing on a fire hydrant is what I call it. And I said, okay, now we're going to pee on a fire hydrant. So you kind of crank up the hip. Sometimes it's blatantly obvious. And sometimes I'm like, are you just nervous? Are you just nervous? So in Ferris's case, he was an obvious case. He was creaky. We did not take radiographs of Ferris that I can recall. But that's the other way to learn things. If you're suspicious or you want to be thorough, you take x-rays. But the best way to know that a kitty has pain, if they're not blatantly obvious like Ferris was at the nursery, is to use your eyes. And that's what the people at the nursery did. They used their brains and their eyes, and they said, they probably talked amongst each other and said, hey, do you see how he hesitates before he jumps up? Do you see how he uses things to jump up now? Instead of jumping on the counter, he uses the chair to get on the counter. Hey, do you see how when he goes to get down from the counter, he hesitates, puts his paws out and kind of slides down? Those are huge clues. So it's not enough when a family says to me, I'll say, how's your cat getting around? Still getting up on the counter? And they'll say, yep. I say, does he hesitate before he goes up? So you look, you put on your detective hat and you look for, how has this changed? He still does it, or he doesn't do it. I have families who say to me, oh, my cat's never gotten on the counter. And that's a whole different discussion. Gets my brain spinning too. So that's Ferris. So Ferris has improved dramatically because they called and we're doing some particular things to help him. But he's a great example of use your eyes and watch how things have changed with how they sit, how they stand. Are they stiff upon standing? How, if a kitty used to love you patting them right above the tail, one of, my cats are like, please pat me there. But now they don't. It may not be a grumpy kitty. It might be a painful kitty.
The Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society in Salisbury, Massachusetts has been caring for cats in need in New England for over 30 years. From groundbreaking adoption programs for special needs, feline leukemia and FIV positive cats, starting as early in the 1990s, to the TNR clinics and trap rentals, to life-saving medical assistance and low-cost spay-neuter services for owned cats and behavioral coaching that keeps more cats in their homes. MRFRS has been on the forefront of feline welfare and a leader in their field. To learn more about the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society's comprehensive approach to feline care in their community, or to view job openings to be part of the team, visit mrfrs.org. That's mrfrs.org. Ready for a grant challenge like no other? Mark your calendars for the Inclusive 2024 Open Arms Challenge. For the entire month of April 2024, animal shelters, foster-based organizations, and public charities are encouraged to create a new program or expand an existing one focused on keeping pets and people together. Learn more about how to register and important dates at maddiesfund.org. Are you passionate about spay-neuter? Do you want to create more low-cost opportunities for spay-neuter in your hometown? If this sounds like you, then there's a brand new podcast you'll definitely want to check out. Tune in to United We Spay, a monthly podcast from our friends at United Spay Alliance, hosted by me, Stacy LeBaron. Each episode delves into the heart of the spay-neuter movement, addressing root causes of overpopulation and empowering communities for a brighter future. On United We Spay, we answer tough questions, shift the conversation from symptoms to prevention, and champion solutions for limited access to affordable spay-neuter services. United We Spay is your go-to source for making a difference, spreading knowledge, and elevating the conversation around the importance of spay-neuter. Available now wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. So, is there long-term treatment? Are there medications? You're talking about discovering this maybe even earlier in life than we anticipate. Does that mean we are relegating our cats to being on medication for the rest of their life, or are there other solutions?
We are so blessed to have a growing toolbox for our kitties. And the toolbox includes things that have been around for quite a while now. The toolbox is interesting. So we've got medications, and some of those are oral and some of those are injectable. We have supplements or natural approaches to helping joints. And so when I'm thinking about helping pain in the context of not acute traumatic pain, but chronic pain, I think about a few different dimensions. There's a lot of dimensions, but one is controlling inflammatory pain. So that's where we started with Ferris and his comfort. But then we also want to think about supporting their joints. So your joints, when you're a little baby and running around and playing games, they're so full of joint cushion and joint lubrication. But as we age, we lose that. And as we get disease, we lose that. So we want to focus on making the joints happy, controlling inflammatory pain and other types of pain. That's where we start with our thinking. And then the toolbox, if you look down even deeper in the toolbox, there's other things to consider. Now, we're not doing some of those things with Ferris, but we can talk about what's available to other kitties. And I'll tell you about another family, younger cats. And that's an interesting situation. So for Ferris, what we're doing right now is we're giving him a medication, and it's injectable, subcutaneously injectable, and it's called Solensia, Solensia. Injectable Solensia is an FDA-approved pain medication, and it works through antibodies. It's pretty fascinating and amazing. It was studied for quite some time in cats, and it is, in my mind, close to a miracle medication for pain. So I went down to the nursery. I gave an injection of Solensia. Within a week, they gave me feedback that he was a different cat and able to leap and interact. He was more active. He wasn't just laying there, which is another clue when cats aren't as active. Yeah, getting older is one thing, but it also can be pain. So we're doing Solensia now every month, and it's made a world of difference for him. The other piece I'd like to add on for him, an injectable terrifies a lot of people. They think needles, Wow, injectable for cats can be so much easier than getting a pill down, right? There's tricks to all of it, but learning how to give an injection with someone who can teach you can be life-changing. And when I give injections here to my cats, if I'm giving just a little itty bitty bit, I'll use what's called a 27 gauge needle. I call it a mosquito bite. That's how big it is. It's like a mosquito bite. And are they mildly annoyed with me? Yes, but they are eating churro and other snacks the whole time. So they're like, it's worth it. It's fine. And so you can give injections in a way that's very kind. In terms of Solensia, the side effects I have had, the only side effect I've seen with that medication is when I give the injection, sometimes there's a momentary reaction that makes me think that for a second it might be uncomfortable. It is well worth it. So that med is amazing. And then in terms of the toolbox that we can all reach into, you want to look at changes in the environment. So for both for Ferris and for other kitties, we want to make sure all of the things are close by and easier to reach. So the things meaning important resources for the kitties. So I learned this years and years ago with my first kitty, Nero. He was around 17, seems to be the magic age for things to happen. And I honestly woke up and thought to myself, you have all your litter boxes in the basement. Your cat is an 85-year-old man. He has to go down a flight of stairs to go potty every time. And I didn't take them away. I added litter boxes upstairs. He never went down the stairs again. He said, this is great, Mom. Thanks, finally. So have things close. I use pitchers for my cats at home, and I fill them to the brim so they don't have to bend over. So it's really comfortable to come up and lap off the top of a pitcher. So get creative and think about it. And please think carefully about what a good litter box is to a cat, and don't spend $600 on those covered caves, automated. Cats don't want to be in a cave. And when you're an old cat, it's really hard to get in and out of these tiny, holed, giant walled contraptions. So I use long, open storage boxes like from Target, fill them 2 inches deep with litter. And I have no cover, and it's got to be easy. These cats need at least a divot so they can easily get in and out, no tall sides. So look at the resources and make them easy. Those are a few thoughts around comfort.
Yeah. One campaign I've talked about with the folks from the online behavior day that I do every April is lift the lid. It's just, it should be everybody, just try it out, lift that lid. And then the shelters would have such a reduction in the number of phone calls about inappropriate elimination. It would reduce the demand. We've talked about our shelters being overwhelmed with, requests for assistance, population, control, all that kind of stuff, and capacity for care. If you just said lift the lid, it would really triage a lot of situations before it got into trouble. So
I love that. Lift the lid. It's beautiful. I'm going to start using that. That's good. I use a grading scale. So people come in. It's funny. People come in, and instead of saying, oh my goodness, or worse to them, they let on how often they're scooping. I said, oh, I have a grading scale. My grading scale is this. If you're scooping twice a day, you get an A+. If you're scooping once a day, you get an A. And then the grades start to fall. And there's a lapse of about 5 seconds, and their eyes get big, and they're like, oh, they've realized their grade.
So there was one more story you'd like to share with us today. Was it Zeno and Argo?
Zeno and Argo. It's a good tale. So this is a family. You would love this family. This is a family who loves their cats and dogs, and their home, their life, their everything revolves around how can we make life better for our animals. So what a gift. But their home is interesting, and they were having spats. Zeno and Argo, they're like 6 to 8. They're under 10. They're single digits. They're youngish, healthy cats. I guess if they're 8, they're considered young seniors. They're like my age. They were brothers, a bonded pair, living in a home with no obvious variables, but they were having spats, and the spats could get quite ugly. And so we talked at length. about what could be causing these spats. And there are a few variables. So the variable that is pertinent to what we're talking about today, Mom shared that the kitties were not jumping up on stools. She would do lots of training and treats and give me your paw and jump on the stool, and they weren't doing it. They didn't want to jump on the stools anymore. And so we factored in, could pain be part of the problem? And we did take some radiographs, so x-rays. They were not conclusive whatsoever. So it wasn't a train wreck kind of situation where you go, okay, but that's true. You can have arthritic changes and they can be non-bony cartilaginous changes that don't show up on x-rays. They can also be muscles. They can be other things. So it doesn't mean there's not pain. We started them on Solensia and everything has changed. So they get that injection every 4 weeks. They're also on Anquin. So Anquin is a canine product. It is not FDA approved for cats. And so we steal from the dogs and give it to the cats. And I embrace it because it is a way to lubricate their joints and improve their joint cushion. And it's the only product we have, to my knowledge, that helps cartilage health. So these kitties are getting their joints lubricated, their pain controlled. Months have passed and the feedback is no spats, nothing, peaceful household. I love that image. I love this family who took the time to thoughtfully dive in and roll around with why are they spatting. I would love to clone them as people in the world and say, yeah, I'd like everyone to be a detective and say, hey, my cats seem to be young, but maybe they do have pain. So that is a cohesive relationship and household, and we couldn't be happier.
That's amazing. I would never have thought of that. And I also know quite a few feline behaviorists who say their multicat aggression issues is one of the number next to litter boxes. It's the next one of behavior issues is cat on cat aggression. And, and so there's a lot of strategies out there, but I don't necessarily know pain is at the top of that list. And I think it should be for sure.
It's amazing. So one thing I want to mention is resources that are available to people that can help you. So you say, okay, all right, I want to be a detective. What does that mean? So what that means is you should go to painfreecats.org. It's a wonderful website. Painfreecats.org has this tool. They call it their feline musculoskeletal pain index tool, which is very wordy. It's basically your detective list. And you will log on, you'll put in your kitty's name and a few facts about them, age, etc. And then you answer questions like, how's your kitty doing jumping up and down? How are they doing on stairs, up versus down? An interesting one is, does your kitty like to be held or lifted or caressed? Are there changes with that? They don't talk a lot about reactivity to other animals, but keep it in the back of your mind. But they do talk about, is your cat stiff after resting? How are they stretching? A big one we see is grooming abilities. If I see a kitty who's really got a back end that is like they're really beautiful in the front and smooth, but the back end is really nappy and you're like, dude, you're not grooming back there. One, I look at their weight. Weight's a factor. My Chubba Wubba kitties, I say, maybe they can't get back there. So weight is also a factor to comfort. But a lot of my painful arthritic cats, they don't get back there anymore. So those are really good clues. So use that website. It's delightful. It's free. And you can put in any number of cats and get a pain score back. If you then want to be a scientist, you can take your pain score before doing something. So let's say you do Solensia or Anquin or a number of the other different things you can do for comfort. There's natural products like Caneva. I really trust. There's a company called Peak Vets with a CBD product. So if you live in Colorado or another state that is open to giving them therapeutic CBD, Peak Vets is a good product. So you can try some natural products too, as well as the Anquin. And then in a month or 2 months, you take the index quiz again and you say, is my pain score for kitty lower than it used to be? It's a really helpful tool for us to say, not just I think he's doing better, but look, the numbers show me he is doing better or she is doing better.
That's a great resource, and I appreciate you sharing that with our listeners today. Dr. McVicker, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we close out?
Yeah, I have a few other thoughts beyond the idea of medications and the traditional meds like nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories. We've heard of Metacam, Onsior. Those are wonderful too. There's other tools in our toolbox that aren't medicinal, but they can help with pain. So I'd encourage people to think about the idea of using cold laser. So cold laser is a tool you might see at a veterinary hospital. You definitely see it at rehabilitation centers, and that will help with pain relief, inflammatory pain. It can help muscles, tendons, arthritic joints. Those are usually credible if they're the fancy pants 3B or class 4 lasers. They're pretty expensive, so usually people aren't lining up to buy them. But if you're a secret billionaire, you can always buy your own, learn how to use it. There's something called PEMF tools. They're pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, which sounds like a bunch of hocus pocus and mumbo jumbo. I'm pretty critical and cranky, and these tools are substantiated to make a big difference for pain. So be aware of PEMF tools. If you want to look at some good ones, the Assisi loop and the Assisi chamber is really good, and there's some other products out there on the market. And my last two thoughts are rehabilitation is not just for dogs anymore. It sounds like a motto. So if you want to think about finding someone who is a magician, that's what I call physical therapists for animals, you can go to Canine Rehab Institute. Feel free to slap me. Canine Rehab Institute. And then you search under find a therapist. Even though it says canine, it's also for cats. And you can ask the therapist, hey, do you work with cats? I am blessed at the hospital where I work with 3 rehab therapists. They are miracle workers. And I have referred many cats to them. And we have cats sometimes in our current pool. They will swim. They've been in our treadmill. And there's tons of hands-on and things families can learn to do at home for their cats. And if you want to get really into the weeds, there's also access to board-certified veterinary pain management practitioners. And if you look under veterinary pain practitioner, you're going to find the smartest people on the planet when it comes to things like intra-articular joint injections and other fancy things.
Wow, this was a masterclass today on dealing with pain with our cats. Dr. McVicker, I'd like to thank you so much for joining me today as a guest on the show. And I hope we'll have you on again in the future because I think that this area is changing very quickly.
It's beautiful. This was lovely. Thank you for all that you do for the kitties. Thanks to everybody.
That's it for this week. Please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. We love to hear what you think, and a 5-star review really helps others find the show. You can also join the conversation with listeners, cat caretakers, and me on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to hit follow or subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss a single show. Thanks for listening, and thank you for everything that you do to help create a safe and healthy world for cats.